RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
Hey, it's Greg Stanley with the Collector Car Podcast with you again, another Thursday, and I'm going to dig into some of the Monterey results. This is a deep dive, so I'm crunching the numbers for you. I've been doing a lot of homework on this. It's a couple weeks late just because there's a lot of work to do behind the scenes to come up with this information. So if you would like to have this in newsletter form, just shoot me your email, greg@thecollectorcarpodcast.com. I just sent it out this morning. So if you are subscribed to my newsletter, all of this information is in your inbox as we speak. Now, when it comes to Monterey, when the auction houses do well, that means the collector car world is healthy. So for this review, I sourced a lot of information, mostly from Hammer Price, but I've also cross-referenced with Glenmarch, the auction house press releases, a lot of different places, and then I put it all into this podcast episode. Now, I will cover a little bit of everything from top sales, record sales, Ferrari, Porsche, some of the stuff from the 50s, muscle cars. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in Monterey. So stay tuned. If you want to hear one aspect of the market, just continue to listen in because I will probably cover it. Now, I have to give you a heads up on a couple things ahead of time. First off, when a car goes to auction, it's up to the car specialist in the auction house to come up with an estimate range in which they think that car will sell. So a low to a high estimate range. Ideally, in my world, I like to try to get it just right so that it sells mid-estimate when that car crosses the block and in Hammers is sold. Now, there are some strategies. Sometimes you'll hear of some car specialists putting out a lower estimate to get buyers very excited about a car. Other times you hear about clients that insist on a high estimate, which honestly just scares people away from actually bidding on the car because they feel like it's unreachable. So there's a little bit of magic going to creating estimates. So just because a car did not hit the low estimate does not necessarily mean that it was well bought or poorly sold. So just a word of caution there. Also for these results, Mecum does not release estimates for some reason for Monterey. So I have their results only as it relates to total sales and sell-through rate. So I wasn't able to do how they did against a low estimate because they did not provide a low estimate, which I kind of wish they did. It would have made for a little bit more information, multiple data points that I could have drawn my results from. Now also the timing of the data. So this data was pulled right after Monterey, and it's when the auction houses were still actively trying to sell cars that may not have sold over the auction block, but the car specialists were working hard after the fact to get them sold. So one example I'll call out is I know Broad Arrow sold 2 of their top 10 most valuable cars after the auction, which impacted their sales by $6 million. So that is not reflected in these results just because of the timing in which I pulled the information. Now, as you all know, I'm sure RM Sotheby's had a huge sale with a Ferrari SP3 that hammered for $26 million, world record price. That, because it was a charity auction car, that is not included in the results outside of total sales. So Gooding Christie's is a little bit different because there was a ballpark low estimate of around $23 million for their big Cal Spider that sold for just over $25 million. So that one was recorded in these results. All right, so what are my headlines from this sale? I would have to say records were shattered, but at the same time, expectations were reset. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's a seismic generational shift underway within the collector car marketplace. A lot of things happened in Monterey. You can see this come to fruition. So one example I'll give you is that while there was almost 72% sell-through rate of all cars across all auction houses, about 60% of the hammer prices, excluding the buyer's premium, landed below the low estimate. So what does this tell us? This tells me that sellers are becoming more realistic about today's market and allowing their cars to trade at true market value, meaning that when the estimates were created by the car specialist, there's a little bit of give and take there where maybe the consignor wanted a higher estimate, and they realized in Monterey at that time when their cars on the world stage you know what, this is all the money for this car. I'm going to let it go, even though maybe it didn't reach the low estimate. So that happened in 59.6% of the cars that sold in Monterey. So sellers are getting more realistic in what their cars are worth. Now, the flip side of this is that there were a lot of records. RM Sotheby's recorded 14 new records, everything from a Yenko Super Sport Camaro that blew past the previous record by over $200,000 to a Ferrari 512 TR, again, 200 grand above the previous record. One of the big ones was the Ferrari F50, which almost hit $10 million, which was really amazing to see, as well as the F40 LM, which netted out around $11 million. I think that doubled in price since the last time one was sold publicly. Broad Arrow had 8 new records, including a 2005 Maserati MC12 Stradale. That one's really interesting just because it's based on an Enzo. I would call it more attractive, limited production. I believe they made 50 of those, but is honestly being held back by the Maserati name, which isn't as lucrative or as well known or as honored as much as Ferrari is. If that was a one of 50 Ferraris, it would be even higher. A lot of their cars were more modern stuff, like the Koenigseggs CCXR, BMW M1 Pro Car, Dodge Vipers, Hennessy Venom GT, and then Gooding Christie's had the record for a 250 GT short wheelbase Cal Spider, aluminum bodied, for around $25 million. And as well as a Daytona Competizione Series 3 for $8 million. And then Bonhams had a couple supercars that really rang the bell, including a Bugatti Divo at $8.6 million. Now, I did not show any records announced for Mecum, so typically Monterey is not one of their big sales. You have to go to Kissimmee or to Indianapolis to get their bigger results. Now, as far as sell-through rates, it was led by RM Sotheby's and Bonhams. So I showed, based on my information, Bonhams had a 100% sell-through rate, while they publicly say 96%. So I can't quite figure out where that 4% went. They did have 6 or 7 cars that were withdrawn. So if they were withdrawn, they were taken out of my results, but that might be the reason for the difference. And then RM Sotheby's had 84.8%. I think their final tally was around 87%, so that tells you that a couple cars got sold post auction. And then what was interesting is both RM Sotheby's and Bonhams were the most successful at selling cars under the low estimate, meaning they didn't have as many as the other auction houses. RM Sotheby's was at 43.8%, while Bonhams was at 48.3%. So when we look at the records, what really jumped out at me? It was the fact that 77% of the total record sales were cars that were built after 1980. Now, that's not subtle. That's a huge trend that's talking about the generational shift that's happening right now. Cars that once lived on the bedroom posters or in Gran Turismo garages are now the ones commanding record bids under the auction lights. This could be a Ferrari from the 90s, Porsches from the 2000s, hypercars that are basically brand new. These are the cars that are breaking records and the collectors are chasing right now. Now, this makes sense because as new generations step into the market, they're bringing their own nostalgia with them. So this is the same way the baby boomers once drove prices sky high on 60s muscle cars and pre-war classics. Gen X and millennials are now doing the same with the cars that defined their childhoods. So I've often been quoted as saying that anyone who was pining after a 1957 Thunderbird is probably liquidating that car right now. It's just facts of life. Generations change. As you get older, you start liquidating your collections. And so that's what's going on right now. Now, when I look at these auction results, I also like to look at $1 million results. So let's see who had the best results when it came to selling cars that were worth over $1 million. Now, RM Sotheby's led the field, delivering $37 million lots with an 82.2% sell-through rate, which that is really, really impressive. But what was even more impressive is that over 13% of these lots sold above their high estimates. So that's a really strong sign of bidder competition and seller success. Now, Gooding Christie's followed in second with $21 million car sold at 61.8% sales rate. And then 4.8, just under 5% of those managed to exceed their high estimate. So sellers of 7-figure cars aren't just looking for a sale, they're looking for the best possible outcome. So if you're a consignor, the message is clear. The choice of auction houses matter to get that car sold. All right, something else that really popped in Monterey was the strength of JDM cars, Asian cars, Japanese domestic market cars, or Asian cars that were made for the U.S. market. So there are only 24 examples crossing the block, but 22 of those found new homes in Monterey. Now, some of the standouts, the one that really stood out in particular was the 1996 Nissan Skyline GTR Nismo 400R. This was offered by RM Sotheby. It's one of just 44 ever built, and it hammered for just under $1 million, which was approximately mid-estimate. This was quite a car. A lot of next-gen collectors were walking around this, buzzing around it all week. They were truly excited to see such a rare car come on offer, kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own one of these. Now, what might be a takeaway if you're a collector looking to get into the Asian market? Now, rare homologation specials such as the 400R Super Turbo, NSX Type R, they continue to gain traction. Now, JDM and Asian exotics are punching far above their weight relative to supply. Now, the time is ripe to consider bringing rare Skyline Supras or RX-7s to market while demand is surging. Like I said, 24 cars were offered, 22 sold. Now, how about an update on Porsches for Monterey? Now, what has surprised me is that for the past few years, much of the collector car marketplace has been in a bumpy place, except for Porsches. Time and again, the marque has defined broader trends, holding its ground harder, stronger, and longer than I ever thought it would. Now, Monterey was no different. Now, while the results weren't shocking or record-shattering, they were telling. Porsche continued to perform with the same consistency they show on the auction block as they do on the track. Now, with the exception of Mecum's 52.5% sell-through rate, every other collector auction house posted strong results, with their sell-through ranging from 74.1% to a perfect 100%. Once again, RM Sotheby's and Gooding Christie's led the charge, pushing beyond high estimates, 14.3% for Sotheby's and 10.5% for Gooding. Now, what does this tell us? Porsche continues to represent stability in a shifting market. Buyers know what they are getting: engineering excellence, racing pedigree, and consistent value retention. Whether it's a rare air-cooled special, a modern halo car like the Carrera GT, or even a roof-badged legend, the Porsche name continues to inspire confidence and strong bidding. What's my advice to collectors? Modern halo cars, 918 Spider, Carrera GT, and ultra-rare variants. Think RS 4.0, GT2 roofs show continued strength. There are stable performers. Late air-cooled and early water-cooled icons remain consistent, with a few surprises, such as a GT2 or GT3. And there are opportunities. Porsche remains one of the most reliable categories for both buyers and sellers, offering liquidity and confidence in a shifting market. Now, of course, if we're talking Porsches, we need to move on to Ferraris. Now, this one is a very interesting one. As always, they headline every year at Monterey. You don't need to look far to see that they had a standout year. The record prices I mentioned before speak for themselves, but the proof is even clearer in the top 10 sales of the entire week, where 8 of the cars wore the Prancing Horse badge. Number 1, as I mentioned, was the $26 million Ferrari Daytona SP3 Coupe. Right after that was Gooding's Cal Spider. Third place was the F40 LM GTC Coupe, offered by RM at $11 million, and then the F50, just over $9 million. Number 5 was the Bugatti Divo Coupe from Bonhams for $8.5, and that's the top 5. Now, clearly, modern halo cars and rare competition Ferraris carry today, but what about the golden age classics from the 1950s and the 1960s? I get this question a lot, especially when I'm judging Ferraris at Hillsborough or at Cavallino, and it's interesting because it goes right back to who the Ferrari buyers are today. If you think about it, when you see someone chasing a Ferrari nowadays, it's not the older stuff. It's not the stuff from the 50s and the 60s. It's the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So for the 1950s Ferraris, just 5 of the 11 cars on offer sold, and every one of them hammered below the low estimate. A clear sign that while blue chip names attract attention, such as Ferrari, the market is becoming increasingly selective in this segment. Now, how about 1960s Ferraris? I'm thinking GTOs, short wheelbases. The results were more encouraging, with 15 of 25 cars sold. Still, 10 sold under the low estimate, while only 4 exceeded their high estimates, showing that even within Ferrari's most celebrated decade, buyers are exercising discipline. Now, what are some collector takeaways? Modern icons, think LaFerrari Apertas, F50s, F40 LMs, and rare competition Ferraris continue to command top dollar and drive bidding wars. 1960s models are still moving, but buyers are pickier. Only the very best examples are breaking past expectations. Now, quick caution flag here. 1950s Ferraris are struggling, with every sale below estimate signaling a cooling demand for this era. Now, for sellers, if you have a modern halo car or a rare competition Ferrari, the market is primed for great results. If your collection leans towards the 1950s, now may be the right time to consider selling before selectivity turns into market softness. You know, I hate to see that because I love those Ferraris from the 1950s and 1960s. Those are by far my favorite Ferraris of all time. Now let's talk about muscle cars, sports cars, and pony cars. This one really surprised me. On paper, the overall sell-through rate for the segment was a modest 66.3%. But if you dig in a little deeper, you'll see that the story is far more interesting. Both RM Sotheby is at 66.7% and Broad Arrow at 18.2% recorded double-digit percentages of cars selling above their high estimates, showing that select offerings had serious momentum. Now, I was not working at Sotheby's this year. I was there in person, just taking it all in, and I watched in disbelief as a 1968 Shelby GT500 King of the Road surged to $100,000 over its $175,000 low estimate, only to be followed by a world record result for a 1967 Chevrolet Yenko Camaro Super Camaro 450, which hammered for around $300,000 above its low estimate. Both were exceptional examples, well documented, beautifully presented, and perfectly timed. The message is clear. When it comes to American muscle, buyers will pay a premium for perfection. Now here's a few collector takeaways. Rare, highly original, or perfectly restored muscle icons, think Yenko Camaros, Shelby KRs, Hemi Mopars, are achieving record-breaking premiums. Now, average or over-restored examples are struggling, keeping the overall sell-through rate down. Now, if you have a true standout car, documented provenance, top-tier restoration, or rarity, now is an excellent time to sell, especially with RM Sotheby's proven track record in this category. Now, for buyers, the market is bifurcated. What does that mean? Great cars are bringing big money, while driver quality examples remain affordable relative to recent highs. Yeah, I love the muscle cars. You know, I got an unrestored 66 Pontiac GTO in the garage. That one's super rare. That one has great documentation, but I am not selling it. Now, what does this mean for you? We just went through a bunch of the results for all the auction houses at RM Sotheby's. But what can you take from this? The Monterey results show a market that is evolving quickly, rewarding the best examples, shifting momentum towards newer icons, and reminding us that the right venue makes all the difference. Now, as always, if you're considering selling, now's the time to start planning ahead. RM Sotheby's Scottsdale and Miami auctions in early 2026 will be prime opportunities to showcase your car to the right buyers in the right setting. So as always, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll be glad to review your collection, discuss timing, and help position your car for maximum success. It really is a great time. We have Hershey coming up here in a few weeks. That is locked and loaded. Not much else for the rest of the year except to get ready for the big auctions in Q1 of next year. So as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. And I will talk to all of you next week.